Welcome to the Hope After Child Loss podcast, where we endeavor to offer stories of hope to grieving parents and siblings so that they might rediscover life filled with meaning, purpose, and hope. We invite you to come and join us. Good morning, Bob. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Greg. Good to be here.
Well, listen, I wanted to ask you if you would, to begin with this morning, could you just take a minute and just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, my name is Bob Sloan, and I am a career journalist. I've been in the newspaper business for 30 plus years.
Oh, wow.
And I've held just about every position imaginable in a newsroom. I also work as a pastor of two small rural churches, one in Society Hill and one in Patrick, South Carolina. Society Hill Presbyterian Church and Patrick Presbyterian Church. I am currently raising my two grandkids, Julius, who is 13 now, and Alexis, who is 7. And I am awaiting a marriage at the end of May. And Deb and I are looking forward to that. We're actually going to make it she came up with a name for it. It's a family vacation / honeymoon. All the kids are going.
You have to admit that's a bit unusual.
Well, I've got my younger daughter and her daughter coming with us, so it's just a small family gathering at Southern Shores on the Outer Banks. We'll be there for a week. We'll arrive on Saturday, get married Sunday morning on the beach, and then from that point on, Deb and I will have a couple of days to ourselves, and our daughters have promised that they'll kind of mind the kids a little bit, but it's an opportunity for us to just celebrate us and celebrate our blended family.
Nice. And that can be a real challenge at times, but it sounds like you guys are getting off to a really good start. That's exciting news.
I'm very thankful and feel incredibly blessed. Deb is an absolutely wonderful person, and the kids look to her to some degree as a mom. She looks after them, takes care of them, and we do it together.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, it takes a team effort.
It most certainly does. I've been there. I was a single dad who raised both of my girls on my own, and I look back on it, and it seems near impossible that I was able to accomplish and raise those kids the way I did, but it took a collective effort from a lot of the neighbors. They were my angels who were there. For example, when the girls went to prom, they did not want dad doing their hair or their makeup. So it was the neighbors, Lisa and Jeanette, who stepped in and helped out. Any number of things. You have to do it together. But now I've got a true partner in Deb, and I love her dearly. And together, I think those kids, we're going to love them to death. That's what we're going to do. Love them.
Yeah, it's pretty cool how God strategically places people in our lives at just the right time, isn't it?
Yes, most certainly does.
Well, Bob, you and I met about a year ago, and I had the opportunity that day to hear a bit about your story and your sweet daughter, Tracy Ann, and how you lost her to an overdose. You were very open that day, and I would love for you to tell us a little bit about Tracy Ann, and then take us back and just talk a little bit about what that journey's been like.
Okay. Well, Tracy was born on September 18th, 1989, just a couple of days before Hurricane Hugo. And it's there's not a day that goes by when I don't think about her. When she was 5 years difference, when she was 10, and my youngest daughter Amanda was 5, their mom left, and she just chose to go a different path, and she did not want to bring the kids with her, so it was the three of us. And as I mentioned just a few moments ago, I had an incredible amount of support from the community and neighbors and friends. But we did well. And Tracy had an incredibly difficult time with her mom passing. She did really well in school. She played the violin. She was even invited to the state orchestra. She was that good. Grades did well, and she had a tremendous number of friends. But as she got older into her, I guess 14 or 15, she began having some serious problems in terms of her mom leaving and her relationship with her mom. And I think she kind of fell into the wrong crowd and started hanging out with some folks that I didn't particularly care for, that I did not think were a very good influence. And a number of things, and I put my foot down, and she decided to go stay with her mom for a while. And it would be kind of a ping pong thing where she'd stay there until she got upset with her mom, and then come back and stay with me. And it was back and forth until finally I said, "You can't do this." And so she spent a great deal of time up there with her mom, and that became troublesome. And I believe it was during that time that she began, I guess, checking out the drugs, as a lot of times teenagers will do, with curiosity and just experimenting with things. And I think that began the problem. She eventually returned to stay with me in about 2007, when I moved to South Carolina. And it was there she met a young man named Alex, and she became pregnant, and she had Julius, who was one of my oldest grandson, who I'm helping raise now. And a few years later, there was Alexis. But during that time, some of the friends she had got her involved, addicted. I'm not sure which the answer would be, in opioids. And we saw that there was a problem, and we tried to get her some help. And she tried a couple of times, and she just wouldn't follow through on it. And
How old was she by this time, Bob?
26.
Okay.
And it was May 9th, 2016, when I received the phone call that no parent wants to get. And my youngest daughter and I went racing up to North Carolina, and she had taken an overdose. I believe unintentionally. She loved those children dearly, and I don't think that was her intention. But sometimes drugs, particularly the opioids, can cause you to do things that you would not normally do. And
so true.
It it goes without saying that it broke my heart, left me crushed, and had my world was spinning for a while.
Mm, 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 mm.
It's an incredible. It's really hard to even put into words. There's not a day that goes by when I don't think about Tracy, and I hear songs, just certain things. Brown Eyed Girl was the song that she and I had, and she was just my beautiful angel.
Yeah, yeah. It's a
Still is.
that she always will be. We have that in common. Of course, you know from our story that we lost our son Ryan just a few months before you lost Tracy Ann. So we know that's a very, very difficult journey to find yourself on, that no parent ever envisions that it will happen to them. It's always somebody else. So yeah, I'm so sorry for what you guys have been through. And I was reading, going back to the impact of drugs and how they just kind of take on a life of themselves so often in people. I read something that said that according to the CDC, that somebody in the U.S. died from a drug overdose approximately every 10 minutes in 2019. So over 70,000 deaths that year. And that's been 4 years ago now. I imagine that those statistics have not improved. And it's become an incredibly serious epidemic. And, that epidemic leaves behind not only the victims that succumb to the drug overdoses, but a lot of grieving parents and siblings in the wake of that also. So tell us a little bit about what that impact had on your family, on those of you who survived Tracy Ann's death. Because that's the part that kind of goes unseen. People people that hear about these statistics, the focus is on the ones that we lose. But what goes unseen are folks like you, parents and siblings that get left behind.
Goodness, initially, it rocks your world. I mean, it will leave you emotionally drained, confused, uncertain. You've got so many questions. You blame yourself. You find yourself asking why to so many different questions. What could I have done? Is there anything I could have done to prevent this? In my case, I'm not sure that this is the case with all parents, is anger at some point. Maybe not initially, but at some point fairly early on, you become angry and why this person did this, and you think of them in terms of being selfish, and why did you hurt me so bad? And then I think hopefully you can come to the realization that it was not your daughter or your son per se, but it was the drugs' influence on them. The drugs that they were taking caused them to do things that they would not normally do. And I think the anger subsides then. But more than anything else, your heart's broken and you're hurt. And the tears, it don't seem to want to stop. And there are folks in your life that are around you and they try to comfort you. But sometimes it doesn't help. Sometimes it does. And you just have those moments and periods that are where you just really don't even want to get up in the morning and go out. And then there are other days when you just manage and get out and go. And I believe with my whole heart that I would not have been able to survive that tragic part of my life without God and through prayer and just his presence and the people that he put around, that he surrounded me with, to be Christ's hands and feet and to give me the comfort and assurance that I needed. And I also believe, and I know this is an old adage, but time, and simply time and being able to kind of process everything. And everybody works on a different schedule. In my personal experience, I suspect it was probably a good year before I was actually able to kind of get back to some type of normalcy and keep going.
Yeah, that process can take an awful long time for some people. But you're right. It's not the time that heals. It's what you alluded to a moment ago. It's those people in your life. It's your relationship with God. And don't you think too, Bob, that it's also giving yourself permission to embrace the grief? Because we have a choice. You can run from it. You can try to outrun it, but eventually it's going to catch up with you. And what I'm hearing from you is that with the help of those other people and with God's help, you went to the grief and you embraced it and you walked it out, as hard and uncomfortable as that was. Is that fairly accurate?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's interesting because we just finished up a Bible study on this, how we have the ability to choose our own attitudes. And I say that in regards to how we respond to situations.
Yeah.
And obviously something like losing a child is about as traumatic of anything that anyone could ever experience. And it's difficult to kind of maneuver your way through that. And sometimes you want to fight it tooth and nail. You just want to wallow in despair. And then at some point you have to say, Lord, help me up. That in my case, I had another daughter who I had to help support me. And sadly, I look back on it and I'm not sure that I was able to do that through my grief. I was so focused on my own hurt that I did not pay attention to her hurt. And that hurt me terribly afterwards. And I apologize to her countless number of times for that. And of course, you have to work and pay bills and do all of those things. So, yeah.
Yeah. And that's what a lot of people don't understand if they haven't been there, because all of those normal, quote unquote, normal everyday activities can sometimes feel impossible.
Yeah.
Just making a decision about pretty much anything can almost feel paralyzing. And so it would be easier to opt some days just to stay in bed and do absolutely nothing, because it would be the easier path. But it's like we say so often, it's okay not to be okay for a while. It's just not okay to stay not okay for a long time. And so we have to give ourselves permission to grieve. We also have, as you said, we have to choose our attitude. We have to choose decisions to get up in the morning and to embrace life again at a level that we can. God doesn't expect us to go back to life the way it was before, because honestly, I think you can understand this. Life really will never be the same as it was before. And for those of us who have lost a child, the word normal really doesn't fit so well anymore. It's more like a
Nope.
before and an after, right?
Yep.
And you have to relearn the things that I think it helps you relearn what really is important in life, and to be able to give that your focus, and that those things your priorities.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I like what you said a minute ago about where you found yourself in your relationship with your other daughter after you lost Tracy Ann. And that can be a very difficult place for a parent who lost a child, because you're battling the grief, and your focus does to a large extent turn inward because it's so hard. And the siblings that were affected a lot of times kind of get left on the periphery, as it were.
Yeah.
And some may not realize this, but they're actually known as the forgotten mourners for all the reasons that you talked about a moment ago. And so I think it's very admirable that when you realize that you approached her and you had that conversation with her. And I think that in itself probably did a lot of healing there.
Yes. And when I look back on it now, there was a particular couple in Society Hill. It almost makes me tear up when I think about it. And another couple in Patrick, who kind of took Amanda under their wing. They understood and saw what I was going through and the difficulty that I was having. And they invited Amanda over, spent time with her, took her out on family outings, made sure that she knew she was loved and cared for as I tried to process everything myself. And then I can still remember one of the gentlemen came to me and we had a hard conversation where he said, "Listen, Bob, I know you're hurting, and I know, he said, I can't imagine what you're going through. But what I can tell you is you need to be there for Amanda, that she's hurting as well." And I think that opened my eyes. As hard as that was for me to hear, it was incredibly important. And he did it in a very kind and caring way. And I will be forever grateful for that. And from that point on, I was able to sit down on the couch with Amanda and talk with her, and we shed a bunch of tears and a bunch of hugs, and I think that helped immensely in the healing process for both of us, truly, because I was at a point where I was going to try to be supportive of her, but I was having a hard time doing it, and I think she was doing her best to try and be supportive of me, but she was dealing with her own grief. And by our sitting down, talking to one another, and having that moment or moment where we just kind of spilled out all of our grief and sadness and hurt with one another, we discovered that we both were at a place where we needed each other.
You were both very hurt people. And it's sometimes it's hard to get to that place where you're able to have a conversation like that, but it also reinforces how important communication is between loved ones, particularly when you're going through such a hard season like that, so that each can know what the other's actually experiencing instead of just assuming.
Yeah, I agree totally. To give you, I have a unique perspective, I think, on a pastor's view of losing a child, because in my experience, I was new in Society Hill and Patrick. I was their new pastor, and I just moved into the area when Tracy passed away. so I found myself, uh, there were a lot of faith things that I really had to confront in my own personal life and deal with my grief, while at the same time thinking I have to be there for everybody else because I'm their spiritual leader. That I'm the one that's supposed to show this enormous strength that in the face of this thing that just crushed me, and say, well, God's going to take care of everything and everything's going to be well, and have hope and be able to get up every Sunday and share a message, lead worship, and in the at the very same time, my world is spinning, and I'm asking God a lot of questions why, and trying to understand what's going on. I can recall that one of the things that I found myself many times talking to parents who had lost a child and telling them, well, I can't imagine what you're going through. And now I do. And I realize just how traumatic and painful and how much it hurt. And so that was something that I had to deal with at the time. So it just kind of compounded everything.
Yeah, I can't
It's
imagine.
not easy.
No, I can't imagine that it would be, because, as you said, people typically, we look to our pastors for the answers, and we look to our pastors to come around us and comfort us and encourage us when we're going through some traumatic event in life. And, I imagine, not only as a dad and as a parent, that your perspective on grief, especially the grief of losing a child, before and after, looked very different. But when you compound that with your role and responsibility as a pastor, I can only imagine how impactful that was for you. And I can only imagine that now, if you have an opportunity to reach out to someone who's lost a child, you're approaching it from a very different perspective. And I would think that you probably find yourself being much more compassionate and kind and understanding, and a lot of other adjectives that just maybe weren't as possible previously. Is that fairly accurate to say?
Yeah, absolutely. Just recently, I was able to. I was actually contacted by this family who had lost their son to a drug overdose. They attended another church, but they contacted me and asked me if I would do the service, simply because they knew that I had lost my daughter, that I had lost Tracy, and they understood that I knew what they were going through, that I could empathize with them and I could connect to the pain and the grief. So I said, obviously, I would be honored, and went over there and met with them and spoke with them, prayed with them on several occasions before the service. And a great many times it's simply listening. Uh, you, even as a pastor, you're not going to have all of it. You can direct them to certain scriptures and offer them what kind of comfort you can. But even we don't have all the answers. What you do is you show love and compassion, and oftentimes you just sit there and listen and help them. You just be a sounding board for them, so
Yeah.
that they have somebody who they feel knows what they're going through and can relate to the hurt and pain that they're feeling.
Yeah. And I think you've touched on something really important there. Scripture tells us, I think it's Romans 12:15, if I'm not mistaken, says to celebrate with those who celebrate, to grieve with those who grieve. And that implies the word with would imply presence. And I think that's where maybe sometimes there's a little bit of a disconnect between those who are looking in from the outside at those of us who have experienced this loss. And they're wondering how to do that. They, like you said, even as a pastor, you don't know what to say. You don't know what to do because you're in some respects, you're afraid you're going to make it worse. But the gift of presence is just an unspeakably powerful gift to grieving parents. And as you said, you don't always have to use words because there really aren't any magic words that are going to make them feel all better again. And the truth is, they're not looking for any magic words. The other aspect of that is, even if you had them, somehow miraculously you had just the right thing to say, because they're in such a state of shock at that time, chances of them remembering anything that you said are slim to none. But what they won't forget is that you were there. Would you say that's accurate?
Absolutely, 100%. In fact, one of the things I remember at this funeral service, which it's probably a couple of months ago, but this family, his parents that had asked me to lead the service, one of the things that was important to them is that this young man had he was not very well liked in the community. He had a reputation as someone who was, for lack of a better way of putting it, a hell raiser. He caused trouble. He was a druggie, if you will. And they expressed to me, please try and get people to understand that wasn't the real Travis.
Right.
And that he was actually our son and we loved him, and that drugs can cause people to do things that they would not normally do. And of course, I said, most assuredly, I would do that. So, yeah, it has definitely given me some insight that I can use as I offer pastoral care to folks. Another thing that I've noticed in my experiences, not necessarily with just losing a child, but grief in general, more so obviously when you lose a child, is that sometimes people want to separate themselves. They want to be by themselves. They think no one can help them, and no one can bring them back. So they just want to be by themselves. They don't want to accept help, and they just kind of want to wallow.
Yeah.
If you, now I know that's a harsh term, but it's almost like they want to give up. I can kind of relate to that. But I think it's important to understand that it's okay to receive help from folks and to open up and let some folks, not everybody, but to understand that you can't go through that journey of grief alone. That you cannot just wall yourself off from the rest of the world and expect things to get better, or to at least find healing. Not get better, to find healing.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that re-emphasizes how important community is in our lives. God designed us for community and relationships. And when you find yourself in a traumatic loss like that, that's when you really learn and understand better why God designed it that way, because those folks are God's hands and feet in those times, and they can be so critical in helping you get to a healthier place and helping you be able to just embrace life again. Because it's understandable what you were saying about someone who wants to almost hibernate after that happens, because it's just easier. But sometimes we have to walk it out when we're in something that's that difficult to do. Because as we do that, and as we embrace those emotions, and as we embrace other people, that's what aids the healing process. And sometimes it perhaps even can shorten some of that healing that could take a lot longer if we tried to do it alone. I think it also emphasizes the importance of counselors if we feel like we need someone, if we need some help. There's no shame in seeing a counselor. My wife and I did that for over 3 years. And you have to be careful too, that if you're in a relationship with somebody who's grieving the loss of a child, just notice them. And if you see that they are, if it seems to you like they're slipping, maybe it's possible that they could be going into a state of clinical depression. It happened to me. And it might be that they just need to see someone who even could prescribe something like an antidepressant for them, even if it's just for a little while. It's yeah. Goes back to what you said. It emphasizes the realization that we all need help at times.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. And I am so incredibly thankful for the 2 congregations that I still currently serve, that they, I'm not sure if they've seen me at my best, but I certainly believe that they were there with me during, I won't say the worst, but the most difficult time of my life. They were there and had a front row seat to see me in the most difficult pain imaginable. And they were there for me, and they were very supportive and gave me the space that I needed. Almost 3 weeks before they allowed, fair enough, allowed me. I can remember Alvin saying, I know you want to come up. I'll be here this Sunday, but take another week. You need it. And so it was about 3 weeks before I returned to the pulpit. And I'm very grateful for the love and care that they've showed me. And that's a plug for attending church and becoming a member of a church, because there's nothing that will take the place of that.
That's community.
Have those people there to help you when you need them.
Absolutely. It's a lot more critical than you think prior to experiencing something like what we've experienced.
Absolutely.
Bob, one of the things that I've certainly experienced, and you have, is that, after you've lost a child, and that's one of the reasons that it's the primary reason we do this podcast, is it's so easy to lose hope after you've lost a child. And what we hope to do and pray that we can do through this podcast, through sharing stories, is to offer hope to people who are in that place where they may feel like they no longer have any purpose in life, or where life is never going to be good again. For you, when did you start seeing glimpses of hope again after losing Tracy Ann? Because you're speaking to somebody right now who's probably in that place where they're wondering, how am I going to make it through this?
It's interesting as I sit and think about that from my own personal life. I don't think there was one specific moment, not one that comes to mind immediately. But I can tell you from a pastoral standpoint, there was one such incredibly profound moment that let me know, God let me know it's going to be okay. You can still do what I called you to do. Because during that time, I even questioned whether I could continue as a pastor, if I had the spiritual strength and faith to be able to go up there and share a message, speak on behalf of God, because I was still hurting. And it made you question an awful lot of things. But after I returned to the churches, they let me come back during the week so that I could gradually make my way to the office, and it would be quiet and peaceful, and I could get a few things done and catch up on what I had not been able to do over the past 3 weeks. And I arrived on a Tuesday, and I was there for about an hour when one of the congregants came in, and he just wanted to say hi. And then he pointed out, he said, well, I just wanted to let you know I'm not expecting you to go, but my brother is in the hospital, and he is on a ventilator, and he took a drug overdose. And as I said, he told me I didn't need to go, that he understood completely. But in my mind, I don't think I hesitated for a moment. It was like, that's where I'm supposed to be. That's what I'm called to do. And yes, I thought about it as I went home and changed clothes and grabbed my Bible and headed towards the hospital in Florida. I arrived at the hospital, went in and talked with the family, sat by this young man's side, and before me, in front of me, here is a young man about the same age as my daughter, who just passed away and left me less than a month before. And I was able to be there to comfort the family and to be there for him and do what I needed to do as a pastor until I left the hospital and sat in my Jeep. That I think the significance of that moment really struck me. And I sat in and wept because I realized that God was showing me that he was with me and that I could still do it.
Wow.
That I still had a call and that everything was going to be okay. That was the profound moment for me.
Wow. Well, man, thank you
for... There will be times. Now, it's just, I believe everyone, if they just have the patience and trust in God, sometimes it takes a great deal of patience and faithfulness to just know that he's going to get you through it. He truly will. And you may not have that profound moment like I did there. As I said, in my personal life, I don't think there was a specific moment where he spoke to me in the kitchen or while I was cleaning out the garage, where he just put it on my heart that everything's going to be okay. It was more gradual than that. But it's faith that will get you through.
Well said. Well said. Bob, thank you for sharing that. And I want to thank you for being our guest today. I want to thank you for sharing your story, for being very open and honest about your journey. I think your story is going to touch a lot of lives, and I think a lot of people will be encouraged as a result of listening to our conversation today. So thank you again, and God bless you.
Thank you, Greg, and I greatly appreciate this opportunity to let folks know about Tracy and just to try and share what I can about my journey through this grief. And I hope and pray that something that I shared today might help somebody. That's what it's all about, being there for one another.
Yep, we pray that it will. If you find our podcast meaningful, we invite you to follow us so that you can automatically receive the latest episodes. Also, we'd like to invite you to contact us and talk with us about sharing your story on a future episode, because every story is important and matters to God. Please reach out via email at hope@emptychairendeavor.com. That's hope@emptychairendeavor.com. And as always, thank you so much for listening.